So, hi everybody, dear colleague. I would like first thank the organizer, especially for having maintained the event, despite the context which is still difficult. I'm Amelie ROBERT. I'm currently associate researcher at CITERES Research Center at the University of Tours in France. I'm also associate researcher at Institute of East Asian Studies in Lyon, still in France. So I will talk about the interest of an interdisciplinary approach to improve the knowledge of the past landscapes. So it is now common to use satellite image to know land use, and it's more and more easy as remote sensing technology could know great and constant improvements. So we can have image with higher and higher spectral and spatial resolution. So it's easy now to identify the current land use thanks to this kind of image. But for the past land use, it is more difficult to find sources. So it's more difficult to distinguish and characterize plant formation. So the purpose of this presentation is to suggest ways to improve knowledge of past land use and plant formation. The ways I propose is based on an interdisciplinary approach, especially on geomatics, vegetation survey, and interviews. The method I will present was tested during my PhD research, and the purpose of this research was to know the landscape dynamics, to identify especially the impact of the Vietnam War on the landscape in province of Vietnam. So the study area is the Tra Truy Nguyen province, which is located in central Vietnam. The particularity of this province is to have 3 landscape units, the plain, the hills, and the mountains, as you can see on the map of the province. This province was also particularly affected by the war. It's an area heavily sprayed by the herbicide sprayed by the American Army during the Vietnam War. So it's a herbicide like Agent Orange, which is the most famous. The purpose of this spraying was to destroy the vegetation. So this province was heavy spray because of its location. Indeed, the province is crossed by the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was followed by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. And the province is also located in the south of the border between North and South Vietnam, as you can see here on the map. So to identify the effect of the war, some key dates have to be chosen, and I decide to choose these key dates according to the societal periods to identify the impact of each one, and especially the impact of the Vietnam War. So you can see here the different period I identified. The first one is the colonial period, then the Vietnam War, then the 2 periods for the afterwar, the collectivization and the renewal period. So I have to choose at least 4 key dates to draw the land use. The first one was at the beginning of the colonial period. The second one was before the war. The third one was after the war, and the last one was to know the current land use. But the problem is the availability of sources, and that's why I have to reduce the number of key dates to 4 only. So I will first present the sources I use for the current land use. Then I will present the different kind of sources I use for the past land use. So for the first part, the current land use, I use especially Landsat image and vegetation survey to improve the knowledge of the land use and especially to better distinguish the different types of plant formation or crops. We have the possibility to use a different image taken at different time of the year. So the image are chosen according to phenology or cultural calendar. We can distinguish the different types of plant formation or crops because the different species don't grow at the same time, don't have to be harvested at the same time, so we can more easily distinguish them. For my study, I choose Landsat image because Landsat was launched first. So it's the first Earth observation satellite launch. It was launched in 1972. And so I chose this one because it allowed me to compare with the past land use based on the same sources. So I choose two images according to phenology. And the first one was taken at the end of the rainy season with the advantage to offer higher contrast. And the second one was taken during the dry season. So with these two images, it was more easy to distinguish the different plant formations. The problem to choose this image was especially the clouds, which are frequent in this tropical area. So it reduces the possibility of choice of the image. Whatever the image and their number, we need to conduct field survey. It's really a necessity when we analyze satellite image. Before image processing, we need to know, we need to have plots to conduct then supervised classification of the pixel of the image. And it's also a necessity to go on the field after image processing to validate or to correct the identified land use categories and to know the species in each one, and especially the characteristic of plant. So in Vietnam, when I conduct my field survey, I have to adapt to the field context, and I choose to conduct my field survey along transects, so along lines, especially in hills and mountain areas, because I have to follow the few paths there is there. So thanks to the two Landsat image and the field survey, I was able to draw a map of land use and to distinguish on this map different kind of plant formation, especially different kind of forest and different kind of savanna. The task is a little bit more difficult for the past land use because the sources are scarce, as I will explain you. So I have to use a diversity of. So indeed, the task is more complex when we want to identify landscape dynamics and thus to know the past land use. Sources are more and more scarce. And for example, to know the land use at the end of the war, so in 1975, I could use only one image. It was in fact the only one available. Maybe other could be available, but the clouds were too important, and so the image was couldn't be used. So I chose the image taken in March 1975, and if you see here, you can see the different resolution between the first one is the image taken in 1975. The second one is part of the image taken in 2003. So you can see that the resolution, the spatial resolution is lower for the image taken in 1975, And it's the same for the spectral resolution, because we have a few bands lower than for the image taken in 2003. So it's good to identify the plant formation, to distinguish different kind of plant formation on this image. For the pre-war landscape, it was more difficult again, because there are no satellite image, and I have to use aerial photographs. So it was the only raw data available. The advantage of this data is the higher spatial resolution, but the disadvantage is that they need long processing. They cover a short area. As you can see here, I need 10 photographs to cover a 5-kilometer transect. And these photographs were not available for the entire study area. It was photographs taken by the French army during the Indochina War. So I have to identify the pre-war landscape only partially, only where the field survey was conducted, so along the transect. So it was impossible to distinguish different kind of forest according to these photographs, so these aerial photographs. So I could only distinguish forest and savanna. And to know the land use at the beginning of the colonial period, it was again more difficult, as I could only use a map. It was the only one available. It was the first map of vegetation cover drawn in 1999. But this map has a lot of limits. The major one is that there is no distinction between different kind of vegetation, between different classes of forest. And I could only distinguish poor and dense forest, basing on an hypothesis that the results indicate on the map allow me to distinguish these two kind of forest. So the map allow a very cursory survey of plant formation. So as you can see, I have a great diversity of sources, but with few information about land use and especially about the different kind of plant formation. These different sources were integrated in a GIS, except the map, because it was too difficult to integrate it in the GIS. So I could thus identify the landscape dynamics between each key date, but the reliability was lower for the past dates than for the current state. So especially the land use was not validated by field survey, and moreover the data were not so precise for the past state than for the current one. So I have to use other sources, and especially I go in the archive centers to have other information, but in fact I could only have limited information, and this kind of information were difficult to map. So for example, it was some photos taken during the colonial period in mountainous areas, so we have some information about the land use and the different kind of land use, but also have some photographs taken during the Vietnam War. As you can see here, the effect of the herbicide spraying. You can see the contrast between spray and not spray area. I also could have in the archive some scriptural data, some written data, which allow me to have more information about land use, about the different kind of plant formation. But it was not enough, so the solution I chose was to conduct some interviews with inhabitants of the village where I conduct my field surveys. So by this way I could have more information, and especially I obtain information about the landscape dynamics. I have more details about the landscape dynamics. I could also obtain information about the species, especially the main ones which can be found in the plant formation in the area. I could also have information about the characteristics of this plant formation at different periods, different times. And beside, the inhabitants give me also information about the factor of dynamics. So this solution have great advantage, and especially it was possible thus to obtain information which were more or less seated in a given space, so more or less located. So it's a great advantage, but the interviews also have some limits, and especially the testimony of the inhabitants have to be considered with precaution. Indeed, the inhabitants could have a memory which is faulty, and sometimes they tend to reinterpret the past. Especially what I could note is that they tend to aggravate the impact of the war, and they tend to overestimate the presence of the forest before the war. So the interviews, the testimony of the inhabitants are very interesting sources, but couldn't be the only one, because we need also to have other data, raw data, like aerial photographs, to be sure that what they say is exact or not. So it's one source, but it could not be the only one. We need to have other ones. So like that we can go further toward the reality of the land use of the past. So in conclusion, the main difficulty to conduct research about landscape dynamics and to know the characteristic of the plant formation in the past is the problem of the sources, and it's especially true in global source countries like Vietnam. Spatial data are scarce, and it's even more true when we want to study the past landscape. The testimony of inhabitants is a good way to have more information about plant formation, and especially to know what kind of species were present in the past. So by this study I intend to show the advantage of an interdisciplinary study. This one mix geomatics, botany and ecology, but also sociology, and I show that it's a good way to improve the knowledge of the past landscape and their dynamics. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, do not hesitate to get in touch with me. Thank you.